Good morning, and welcome to First Edition, the online ministry of First Community Church. My name is Glenn Miles, and I'm the senior minister in this amazing congregation, and we are thrilled that you have joined us on this day for worship. We want you to know, no matter who you are, where you're from, what you believe or don't believe, you are welcomed and accepted in this church. I'm thrilled that you're here on this day. Right now, we're going to put a QR code up on the screen. Take your camera option from your phone, capture that code, click on the link, and there's a place for you to register your attendance, to share a prayer concern, and even to give for the offering if you choose to do so. Today's sermon is titled, "'Twas Grace." It's part 3 in my summer sermon series, Real Theology, Going to the Movies with God. The movie that's inspiring the sermon today is the Aretha Franklin story titled Respect. It's a great film, and the music is even better. But what we'll see in the film is that Aretha faced a tough life. Oh, she was a global superstar, unbelievable talent, and yet there were many, many issues. Her growing up years, the pressure she faced, the abuse she received, and more, that all caused her to find herself caught up in addiction. And yet, it's grace that comes to her over and over and over again, bringing her back to the reality that she is a loved child of God. I enjoyed preaching this sermon. I'm looking forward to sharing with you now.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing?
What though the tempest round me rears? I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close? Songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love is blood of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing?
When tyrants tremble sick with fear, and hear the death knells ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? In prison cell and dungeon vile, our hearts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing?
This sermon is inspired by the film Respect, the story of Aretha Franklin's life. Aretha Franklin was a once-in-a-generation talent, an unbelievable superstar. Her musical skills were a marvelous gift that she shared with the world. She was a global talent, known from here to there and everywhere. She was also a civil rights activist. Her father was a great friend of Martin Luther King's. She was not an activist just in the 60s, but all the way through to the end of her life, she fought for equality, for the end of racism. And Aretha Franklin was an addict. She fought with what her family called her demon, alcoholism. All of her days, she was one who needed grace many, many times, over and over again. Don't raise your hand, but have you ever needed grace? How long has it been since the last time you needed grace? A year? I doubt it's been that long. A month? A day? Maybe a few minutes? How long has it been since you stumbled, since you fell, since you uttered an angry word in a harsh and uncaring way? How long has it been since you've needed to see your life through the lens of grace, to give yourself a chance to see hope again? I suspect most of us, if not every single one of us, continues to be in need of grace in some form or another. Grace, and to coin a phrase, is theology with skin on. It's a theological idea that makes its ways to the pews, to the chairs, makes it to your homes, to our everyday lives. Theology is a marvelous thing. It's fun to read and discuss, at least in my world it is. But unless it meets you in the pews, it doesn't help much. Jesus' entire ministry, I would argue, is fueled, is energized by grace. It's grace that allows him to open his arms as wide as possible to the world. It's grace that allows him to seek out the last, the least, the lost, the little, and the dead. Those are the words of Father Robert Capon, by the way. It's grace that allows Jesus to reach the least, the last, the lost, the little, and the dead. It's amazing grace, unbelievable grace, overwhelming grace. It's theology with skin on that meets us where we are. It's interesting to note, John noted that the gospel reading is from John chapter 1. Do you know how John chapter 1 begins, the very first verse? It starts with the beginning of time, the moment of creation. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's a philosophically gigantic text. It says, in its essence, that Jesus, who is the Word, his Spirit, the Spirit of Christ, was there at the beginning of all that is, at that moment, that brilliant flash of light that brought into being the universe as we see it around us. It's not a text you can explain in 20 minutes in a sermon, maybe not even in 20 back-to-back hour-long lectures over 20 days. It's a beautiful, amazing, philosophically brilliant and difficult to understand text, and yet in just a few verses, we have Jesus in the flesh and the declaration that we have all received grace upon grace. Grace upon grace. Well, what does that mean? It means that grace is abiding. It means that grace is ongoing. It means that grace is everlasting. It's not given in one moment here and then forgotten somewhere else. It's not given just at one time. You better get it while you can. It's abiding, ongoing, everlasting grace upon grace. It's the energy in Jesus' ministry and his teaching and his preaching. It's the energy that fuels this church, frankly, that allows us to be who we are at our best, when we are at our best. Grace upon grace. It's amazing when we allow ourselves to receive that grace. Every relationship that matters in your life needs grace. Pause for a moment with me here. Think of the person you love the most, your spouse, partner, a child, or a parent, or a friend. Every one of those relationships, as many as you have, will likely need grace. If not today, perhaps tomorrow. If not tomorrow, the need will come again and again and again. As we'll see in a few moments, so especially when we look at the story of Aretha Franklin and her life, most of the time when that grace is needed, it's a very complex kind of situation. It involves a variety of persons and backgrounds and situations that cannot be sort of shrunk down to he's the bad person, she's the good one. He's the one who needs grace, she better give it to him. Sometimes that's the way it works. Sometimes, most of the time in my experience as a pastor, there are multiple layers at work in the lives of those who need grace. Oftentimes people on both sides of whatever the issue is might need grace. Many times, if not most of the times. Although, like I said, sometimes it's kind of a silly thing, but even grace then can help. About a year ago or so, I was here at my North Campus office, which is right over here. It was about 6:30, the end of a long day. I was ready to head home. I just drive down Dublin Road, and I only live about 6, at the most 7 or 8 minutes drive away from here. It's kind of a nice thing. Oh, if there's a little traffic, it might take 10 minutes to get home. But on this particular day, I got into Dublin Road, and I noticed as I got closer to the intersection with Roberts Road, you know where that is, where there's train tracks right there? Well, it was backed up. Several cars were backed up, 6:30 in the afternoon. Why is there traffic? I saw as I got closer that there was a semi-truck that had tried to make a right turn. It had pulled all the way out into the intersection, blocking traffic in both directions. No way to get around that truck. It looked like, there was by the way, there was a train that was going very slowly as well. It looked like maybe that truck driver tried to make that right turn and get in front of the train and get across before the train comes. Which is a really bad idea, by the way. You won't win the race with the train. Trust me on this. So I sat there kind of fuming and steaming for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I kept thinking I should just turn around and go back around Riverside Drive and use that route to get home. But as soon as I do that, the train will go and the truck will pass and we can move. So I just kept waiting and waiting. By the time I got home, it was 30 minutes later. I was frustrated with myself, frustrated with the day. Parked the car in the garage, went upstairs. I heard Julie's voice from another room say, hey, while you're in the garage, can you run and get some paper towels? I went back downstairs, kind of fuming about having to do a chore already. Got the paper towels, came back upstairs, dropped my backpack, put the paper towels on the counter and said, could I just come home before I start getting an assignment? I kind of barked in a loud voice, before I get an assignment for something to do. Please, next time. Julie, bless her, and pray for her too, by the way, would you please? She just looked at me and she said, what's going on? In that moment, I took a deep breath, and I said, there was a lot of traffic. I was frustrated. Let me start over. Hi, honey. I had a good day. Here's your paper towels. How was your day? It's just a little bit of grace, but it allowed us to move forward without getting caught in the whirlwind of what sometimes can be a vicious and cruel fight. Have you ever done that before? Have you ever got into a fight that started over a very silly reason, and the next thing you know, 30 minutes later, language is almost abusive and angry and filled with words you don't normally use in public? You know as well as I do, sometimes the silliest little things can start and inflame a gigantic argument. When there's a little bit of grace there, though, if both are willing to look at the moment through the eyes of grace, not in a judgmental way, but in a way that sees the future, it can be a powerful thing. Frederick Buechner, the great Presbyterian pastor who was an award-winning author, died recently. He says that grace, you can't get it. It can only be given. If I need grace from you and I come up to you and I say, you need to give me grace, you might give me something, but it won't be grace. It can't be gotten. It can only be given. Aretha Franklin in her life needed grace over and over and over again. We see, though, at her early age, some of the complexities in her family and the various things that were happening to her. Her father recognizes, her father was a pastor. He recognizes early on she has a great talent for music, for singing. She's an unbelievably gifted musician. He puts a lot of pressure on her, though, as the pastor's daughter, to sing in church and also to sing at home. In one particular scene, there's a party going on downstairs. There's maybe 25 or 30 people in the pastor's home. They're having a great time, but Aretha is upstairs, sound asleep in bed when somebody says, oh, pastor, go get Ree. They call her Ree for short. Go get Ree. We want to hear her sing. She's only 10 years old, but she has a 30-year-old voice. He goes upstairs, wakes her. She's asleep, but she wipes the sleep out of her eyes. He said, okay, Daddy. And she comes downstairs to sing. And you can just see by the way she comes down and smiles at everybody, the way she sings, oh, she's got a gift. They just applaud when she's done. Long, loud, roaring applause from the guests who are there. She loves it. But as the story moves forward, we see there are multiple issues in her family. Her father is well known for having many relationships outside of his marriage. Her mother's frustrated by this herself. Her mother will eventually leave him, and we understand why, but in a sense, she's almost abandoning Aretha, her little girl, leaving her behind. That relationship is broken. We also see a scene where Aretha, at about 13, is pregnant with a child, 8.5 months or so. It appears clearly there's not just verbal abuse in her family, but sexual abuse from outside somewhere. We don't really get into that in depth. It's a difficult part of the movie to watch. Clearly there are other issues that lie in her life. Well, we move forward then to when she's 18 years old. She gets married at 18 to a man named Ted, who's 30 years old. No one likes him. The one thing that unites her family, none of them except Aretha like Ted. Her dad says he's abusive. He's not good for you. You should not be in a relationship with him. Her sisters say the same thing. Everyone else seems to be able to see the truth about Ted, but Aretha's in love and she doesn't care. She's also frustrated with her career. She's performing in a lane that's very narrow. She's just recording albums of other people's hits, of other people's standards. It's not her. It's not her true voice that's coming out. She goes to her producer and she says to him, I want to make some hits. I know I've got the skill. She's only 18, but boy, is she strong in her will. I know I have the skill. He says, all right, I've got a band down in Alabama. They're filled with soul. You, with them, you'll produce hits. I can set it up. Ted doesn't want her to go because this means he'll be out from under her thumb. He'll go with her, but he doesn't want her to go. He doesn't like the idea. Her father especially doesn't like it. Her father is against it completely. He doesn't like Ted. Ted's not worth the stuff on the bottom of my shoe. It's a paraphrase of what he says in the movie. You can't do this. And then he says to her, I know what's going to happen, Aretha. I know what's going to happen. You're going to go with him. It's not going to work out well. And you're going to come back home. And I'm here to tell you, I won't let you back in. Those are his last words to her as she leaves. Well, she goes to Alabama. The band is awesome. They play and sing together in a way that Aretha's never done in her life. She's now free to create and write. And she says to the drummer, do this, and to the horn player, do this. It's beautiful to watch. But Ted, who's with her, and the leader of the band, they don't like each other. Soon after a few days, they get into a huge fight in the hotel room where Ted and Aretha are staying. They're on the floor rolling around. Punches are being thrown. Aretha eventually receives one of those punches. She comes home to her father's house. She's left Ted. She's carrying one of her children.
You hungry?
I'm all right.
Come on, little man. Come on. Reeves home.
I'm gonna kill him.
You here for long?
I'm not sure.
And he says to her, how long do you think you're going to stay? She replies, I'm not sure. Amazing grace. All the angry words from Dad were forgotten. The beauty of her grandmother meeting her at the steps without judgment, without a finger wagging, without anything like that at all, is the power and the beauty of grace itself. There were times in our family when our boys were growing up, I'm sure this never happened in your homes, but we had occasional loud conversations that devolved into all kinds of stuff. At the end, once we kind of wrestled through it, do you know what Julie would say to us? Are you hungry? those meals and those moments became sacred representations of the very grace of God given to all four of us. When her father says to her, "How long are you going to stay?" It's through the power of grace. Can you hear how open-ended that statement is, how open-ended that question is? How long are you going to stay? She's home. She's back. The sad part of her story, though, is the addiction, the demon, as her family names it, of alcoholism, continues to chase her throughout her life. There are so many voices and so many things that haunt her from her past. The abuse she received as a child, the abuse that she received from this physically abusive husband, all the different things that have been a part of her and her growing up are there, and it just takes their toll on her. She drinks all the time now, later in the movie. She's drinking from morning, noon, and night. It's ruining her concerts. It's ruining her ability to perform. Even though drunk, she's better than 90% of the world out there, it's still ruining all of her professional career. Her relationship with her band is being upset. Worse than all of that, it's ruining her relationships with those she loves the most, with her family. The complexity is almost overwhelming to imagine what the multiple voices must be saying in her mind. The wrestling matches that are happening. It's hard to understand how difficult it must be to be here, despite her fame, despite her world renown, despite all of the best-selling albums and records and all the rest. Still, she wrestles with that demon until we find her in the movie, literally, spiritually, and physically on the floor. She's hit rock bottom. She's got a bottle of bourbon in her hand. There are empty glasses and empty bottles spread around the living room. There's some angry voices in the background. It's the middle of the night. She continues to sip from the bottle. She is absolutely blasted. When all of a sudden, her mother, the one who'd left her, who had died many, many years before without Aretha ever getting a chance to say goodbye, her mother appears in a vision to Aretha. She looks across the living room from the floor where she's seated. She sees her mother at the piano, quietly playing. It's her mother, the way her mother looked when Aretha was a little girl, beautifully dressed in a bright red suit, playing some lovely tune on the piano. Her mother then looks at Aretha. She gets up from the piano. She walks over to her daughter. Oh, she's an adult now, but it's still her baby girl. In my view, that's how God came to her. God came to her in the form of her mother. God came to her at rock bottom. God came to her in her worst moment in her life, and God wrapped her arms around her baby, singing words of amazing grace. How sweet the sound. My friends, when we look at the world, we look at each other through the lens of grace, we can see ourselves, we can see each other at our worst, not in a way that is judgmental, not in a way that is demeaning, but in a way that opens the door toward the future, in a way that opens the door toward hope. We can do the same thing, frankly, in the United States of America. We can look at our country, we can look at where we are right now in this moment through the eyes of grace, not in a politically divisive way, not in a partisan way. I'm not that interested in politics. I'm a pastor in the Church of Jesus Christ. We can look at our country through the lens of grace and say, yes, at our worst, racism has made its return. We can't let racism continue on. We need the grace of God to help us have the courage to face it and speak it and name it so that it can end again. It's time, my friends, to do so. It's through the power of grace that we can look at ourselves, our country, and our world and see hope and find courage to give ourselves away to each other, to our nation, to the globe, to God. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. 'Twas blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and praise my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead the sun. We've no last days to sing God's praise than when we first believed. We've no last days to sing my God's praise than when we first believed.